Self-awareness is the first step to authenticity. Last week, before I left the house to say Mass, I fielded a question. What's my take on the word metanoia? It was a fascinating question, since this is the exact word that triggered the Protestant Reformation. The short version is that the Vulgate gives Matthew 3:2 and 4:17 as penitentiam agite, which literally means do penance, while the original Greek text says metanoite, which means to make a change of heart, a change of mind, and a change of life. And that's a nice clue to understanding what we're talking about today, because that change cannot happen without some level of self-awareness. So what does it mean to be self-aware? It means to know yourself inside and out, your highs, your lows, your strengths, your weaknesses, your successes, and your failures. It means knowing what standard you can meet at a given time and holding yourself accountable. It means knowing when you've been wrong and having a change of mind and heart accordingly. A person who is not self-aware is more easily manipulated by anybody who figures out what buttons to push. They don't realize that they have various issues or emotional tripe, and all it takes is for somebody else to realize it for them. A person who is self-aware is more able to guard against it, because they're aware that XYZ exists in their psyche. Now, they can still be manipulated by somebody skilled enough. It just won't be anywhere near as easy. In other words, self-awareness is a key component of metanoia. But the word also has another meaning. In the Eastern Orthodox liturgy, a metanoia is also a gesture when one bows, touches the floor, and then rises up and makes the sign of the cross. The gesture denotes humility and puts another ingredient into today's conceptual stew. That word humility is a requirement for self-awareness. People who lack humility generally lack self-awareness because one needs some humility in order to admit that they can be wrong about something. They tend to hold up an idealized image of themselves, almost never see themselves as wrong about anything, and often confuse constructive criticism for a personal insult. People who are self-unaware are often not comfortable in their shell, and that's something we pick up on subconsciously whenever interacting with them. Now take somebody who's very self-aware. The first thing we notice is that they're usually a lot more pleasant to be around. The next thing we notice is that they're willing to accept constructive criticism. They're more willing to stand up for when they're right, as well as admit when they're wrong, and they're more willing to fix what they find and strive to become better people. This is because they have the humility to detach from their emotions and figure out who they really are and where they are in terms of the person they want to become. In other words, a self-aware person is an authentic person because they're in touch with themselves and they understand their motivations. A person who is not self-aware will usually come off as fake, even when their intentions are sincere. And finally, perhaps most importantly, we learn something else from the Eastern Orthodox gesture of metanoia. It's a behavior. Specifically, it's an outward behavior that reflects an inner disposition. Understand this. Your worldview is intimately connected with your behavior. If you change your worldview, you will inevitably change your behavior. Now let me get to the point, since we're gathered here because we're interested in spiritual growth. If you're looking for spiritual growth, the first step is to become as self-aware as you can possibly be. If you're looking to become self-aware, the first step is cultivating humility. This explains why humility occupies such a beginning place in many spiritual traditions. For example, in the Hasidic school of Kabbalah, humility is the kochas hanefesh, or spiritual power of the Sefer HaMalchus. Closer to home, humility is also the spiritual fruit of the first joyful mystery at the beginning of the Rosary, the Annunciation. Humility does not mean to make yourself a doormat. It means learning to turn off the self-messaging that prevents us from going inward and discerning who we really are. Discerning this is an important step towards discerning who we are in our relationship with the spiritual realms and in our relationship with all creation. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. I've mentioned the benefits of self-awareness and its necessity in the spiritual life. But how do we get there? The main ingredients here are introspection and analysis. For some people, this is not possible. For example, if there's a brain injury or a neurological condition. For most people, however, this is very possible. Not necessarily easy, but possible. One method that many people use is keeping a journal. In fact, most spiritual traditions, I can't speak well today. Most spiritual traditions encourage beginners to do this. What you would do is record your major interactions during the day, how you respond to people, and anything that freaks you out or produces a strong emotional response. At the end of the day, you go over it and ask yourself the question, why do I do this, or why did I feel this way? After a while, you'll start noticing patterns and start to figure yourself out. Another option is just talking to people. Actively ask for their feedback about you and take their responses seriously. This helps you get a new perspective, trying to get out of your head and you see yourself how other people see you. Another thing you can do is something I'd rather everybody did. Actually sit down and figure out your belief system. I don't just mean religious beliefs, even though that's a part of it. I mean to try to systematize your beliefs and values around everything you have an opinion about. People, food, sports, social faux pas, Americans who insist on using British spellings, everything. This will help you unearth some unconscious beliefs and biases, and you'll get to know yourself a lot better. So here are a few things that you can do to get started. And it brings us to today's gospel reading. Or for those of you watching this on YouTube now, the gospel reading from the Mass I was saying when I preached this. The angels rejoice over one who repents. Because repentance is the common word used to translate metanoia. And now we know the angels are rejoicing because someone has found themselves and they are turning their lives around. May you be the person they rejoice over next.